Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel. Today we go inside the mind of a small boy from a small island, and we watch him take a crown for himself. So picture a school classroom in France. The year is 1779. The other boys are 9 and 10 years old. They speak French easily, the way you speak your first language, without thinking, without trying. One boy in the room does not. He arrived from a small island in the Mediterranean called Corsica, and his French is slow and heavily accented. His name is almost impossible for French mouths to say correctly. The other boys laugh. The teachers correct him constantly. He sits apart, quiet, watching. You probably picture Napoleon Bonaparte as a short, angry man in a large hat, standing on a battlefield. But that is not where this story starts. It starts here, in this classroom, with a boy who was an outsider from his very first day, and who decided, somewhere in that silence, that the world was going to know his name. That decision, made by a child who had nothing except intelligence and an enormous need to prove something, would eventually change the map of Europe, rewrite the laws of entire countries, and send hundreds of thousands of people to their deaths. And it would end on another island, even smaller and much further away, with the same man alone, still writing, still trying to control the story. Here's the thing about Napoleon. He was never supposed to be French at all. Corsica, the island where he was born in 1769, had been sold to France by Genoa, an Italian city-state, just 1 year before his birth. His family spoke Italian. His real name was Napoleone Bonaparte. He arrived in France as a foreigner, studied on a scholarship for poor students, and was never fully accepted by the class of young men around him. He was different, and everyone could see it. But he was also extraordinary at one thing: mathematics. And in the French military of the 18th century, mathematics meant artillery, the large guns that decided battles. Napoleon studied harder than anyone around him. He finished his military training 2 years early. At 16, he became one of the youngest artillery officers in the French army. Then the world broke open. In 1789, the French Revolution began. The king was removed, then executed. The old social order, the system that said your family name determined your future, collapsed almost overnight. For most people, this was terrifying. For a young officer from Corsica with no family connections and no inherited wealth, it was the greatest opportunity in history. Think about that. The one system that had always kept outsiders outside had just destroyed itself. Napoleon moved fast. At 24, he used his artillery skills to help recapture the city of Toulon from enemy forces and was promoted to general. At 26, he commanded the French army in Italy and won a series of brilliant victories against much larger forces. He was not just brave. He was fast, faster than any army his enemies had seen before. He moved troops at a speed that seemed impossible. By the time his opponents understood his plan, it was already finished. If this kind of history, the moments when one person changes everything, interests you, consider subscribing. There is always another story waiting. By 1804, Napoleon was not just a general. He was Emperor of France. And the way he became emperor tells you almost everything you need to know about him. The Pope himself, the leader of the Catholic Church, one of the most powerful men in the world, traveled to Paris for the ceremony. It was supposed to be the Pope who placed the crown on Napoleon's head. But at the last moment, Napoleon took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it on his own head himself. No one had given him this power. He had taken it. He wanted everyone in the room and everyone in history, Sismo, to understand that. He then spent the next decade remaking Europe. He won battles that military schools still study today. He introduced a system of laws, the Napoleonic Code, that gave equal rights to all male citizens regardless of their family background. Those laws still form the basis of legal systems in France, Belgium, Italy, Spain, and many other countries. He was building something, not just conquering, an empire shaped by one mind, running on one vision. But here's the thing about building an empire on one person's vision. It works until it doesn't. Spain was the first serious crack. Napoleon placed his own brother on the Spanish throne in 1808. The Spanish people refused to accept this. They did not fight like a regular army. They fought everywhere, in small groups, attacking and disappearing. The French called this kind of fighting guerrilla, a Spanish word meaning little war. It was a war with no front line, no decisive battle, no way to win completely. It drained French soldiers and money for 6 years. Then came Russia. In 1812, Napoleon led the largest army ever assembled in European history, around 600,000 soldiers, into Russia. Can you imagine that number? A column of men stretching further than the eye could see, marching east in the summer heat. The Russian army refused to stand and fight. They retreated, burning their own cities and crops as they left, so the French would find nothing to eat. Napoleon reached Moscow in September. The city was already burning. He waited for the Russian Tsar to surrender. The Tsar did not come. Winter arrived. In Russia, that word means something different from what it means in Western Europe. The temperature dropped to minus 30 degrees. Napoleon's army had no proper winter clothing. Horses died. Supply lines broke. Men froze where they stood. He gave the order to retreat. What walked out of Russia was not an army. Of the 600,000 who had entered, fewer than 100,000 returned. The rest were dead, not mostly from battle, but from cold, hunger, and exhaustion. It is one of the greatest military disasters in history. And it was entirely his own decision. Before we reach the end, drop a comment. Do you think great ambition always carries the seeds of its own destruction? Or does it depend on the person? After Russia, the rest of Europe saw that Napoleon could be beaten. They formed a large alliance, a group of countries working together, and defeated him in 1814. He was exiled to the island of Elba, off the coast of Italy. A small, comfortable exile. It was not enough. He escaped. He returned to France. The army that was supposed to arrest him joined him instead. For 100 days, he was emperor again. Then came the Battle of Waterloo in Belgium. In June 1815, he lost. This time, the exile was much further away. St. Helena, a small island in the South Atlantic Ocean, more than 1,800 kilometers from the nearest continent. There was nowhere to escape to. He lived there for 6 years in declining health, growing slower and quieter as the months passed. But he never stopped writing. He dictated his memoirs, his account of his own life, to the people around him. He described his battles, his decisions, his reasons. He shaped the story carefully, the way he had once shaped military campaigns. He presented himself not as a conqueror, but as a defender of the revolution's ideals, a man who had wanted only to bring order and equality to Europe. Whether you believe that version of the story depends on which part of Europe your family came from. He died in 1821. He was 51 years old. The boy from Corsica, who arrived in a French classroom speaking the wrong language, with the wrong name, from the wrong place, he did make the world know his name. Every part of that sentence is true. So is this. He left behind him a trail of wars that killed between 3 and 6 million people, a continent exhausted by more than a decade of almost constant conflict, and a set of ideas about law and equality that are still alive today. That is not a clean story. It was never going to be. The outsider who looked through the window and decided he would one day own the house. He got in. He changed everything inside it. And when they finally closed the door behind him, he sat down at a small desk on a small island and kept writing, because the one thing he could never do, even at the very end, was stop trying to decide how it all should be remembered. The pen kept moving. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed, and some people, once started, cannot be stopped, even by themselves.